Welcome to episode 6 of the Arsenal Women podcast. We're going to do a bit of a Pride Month special today. We're pre-recording this one because by the time it goes out, I'll be in Austria, in Vienna, hopefully a little bit warmer than where we are at the moment. So we're going to talk about all things Pride Month. There's so much we can go into in terms of LGBTQ plus rights that players have spoken up for, the experience of LGBTQ plus fans in the women's game, and the importance of the players as well as role models and allies. Daisy, I think we'll start with you because we're obviously different people here. I can come out and say I'm a straight male. You are a gay female, so we can provide, putting it out like that, we can provide quite different perspectives, and that's why I think we'll have quite a good conversation about this, and we're just going to sort of see where it goes. But do you want to talk to me firstly, because you're going to be able to offer far more than I can on plenty of this topic, and I just sort of want to guide you in the right directions for a lot of this conversation. Just talk to me firstly about your experiences, going to women's games with your partner and maybe how that might compare to if you were to go to men's games.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the women's football has kind of become a comfortable area for most people would say. Obviously there is quite a crossover between people who are in this LGBTQ plus community and women's football. And I think the reason for that is this supportive and open and comfortable environment that sort of we've been like able to be in. And obviously, I think it's great because when we got into women's football, especially when I got into women's football, obviously you go into it and you don't really know anybody. And then to have people or meet people who, first of all, that you're friends with or you become friends with, who are the same as you and they fit into that community and you feel like you belong, that definitely comes from the fact that many of these people are the same in terms of their sexuality. And that's something to have, like, obviously you go because you have a common interest for football, but it's great to have other things as well. And that's kind of how I saw it. And that's actually how I got my girlfriend into women's football was because of the way that it is compared to men's football, and that is the truth. She was never really too bothered about men's football. I think part of that is obviously the difference in environment and how comfortable you feel going to a game. I've been so lucky. I could go to a game with her. I wouldn't be ashamed to do that in any way. I wouldn't be scared of anything in terms of going to like an Arsenal game or a Lionesses game or any game really in women's sport. But I can't say that I would feel the same going to a men's game. That just maybe because of enjoyment of the sport in general, but also a part of that is the community that we've built specifically at Arsenal. Obviously, we have the Gay Gooners; they do amazing work, and also just the friends that you make. You have that common. I don't want to say interest, but that common factor with.
Yeah, that environment, is so amazing that you can just turn up to let's even look at Stamford Bridge when we went there on a Friday night. And now to see, Arsenal fans walking hand in hand, into the shed end at Stamford Bridge, you cast your mind back 20, 30, 40 years. That's never going to happen, is it? And and
No.
that's probably still, unfortunately, in men's football is unlikely to happen. People of the same gender walking in hand and being together and being relaxed in that environment. Why is it the case, perhaps, with women's football that it's so different for, and for the right reasons? And why has men's football, which is making strides, we're constantly seeing the strides, but when you actually compare that to the women's game, it's completely different poles apart, isn't it?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's probably the type of people who are interested in women's football in general. Like there is a crossover between that, and automatically, if you see other people even as fans, if you see other fans going into those games, not being afraid to be who they are, you're automatically going to feel more comfortable going into that straight away. But I think another aspect of that is the players, the way that they are. Like a lot of them are very, very open. Obviously, we've seen Beth and Viv be extremely open, playing for the same club, being in a relationship, their life together. That is so important that we continue to have footballers being those role models, being open about dating women or, being open about their relationships. Obviously, that's such an important thing. I think that's not the only example. Obviously, there's loads of others who are very open about, being gay or bisexual or anything really and having that, that role model there is so important because you feel like you relate to the players on a personal level, and that is what women's football has always been, and that's why I think it's grown so much. And I do think that's potentially why men's football hasn't, kept up in the same way. It isn't the same kind of sport. The culture behind that is very different, and it has been a certain way for so long. It has always been about men watching men's football and women's football being so different to that. That's kind of what we've emphasized, and we're trying to make strides to get people to accept us. But if you're going into it, and you've got those people around you that are the same as you and that you can relate to, you automatically feel more comfortable. And I think that's where men's football is necessarily not kept up. It's not having that representation and not feeling like you can relate to players on a personal level because quite frankly, you can't really.
Now, putting sort of Chelsea and Emma Hayes' biases aside and everything, her comments on, player-on-player relationships, obviously when she was asked about player-coach relationships, which seemed like quite a different topic in many ways. Do you feel that they were damaging at all? Do you feel like they came from the wrong place? And obviously she was quite open in that she thought about them, she spoke to her players afterwards. What did that maybe signify to you, a manager coming out and saying that? And in terms of these, the LGBTQ plus side of it as well, was that a bit of a worrying comment for someone like Emma Hayes to come out and say that?
Yeah, and I do think so. And I think when you're like a character in women's football, or you're a manager who's in a very high up position, who has a lot of coverage and is in some way representing the sport, you have to be really careful about what you say. And I know there's been players also, we might touch on that, who have come out and said certain things or liked certain things on social media. You have to accept that the world that you are in, the community that you are in, when you say something like that, especially like Emma Hayes did, you are going to offend certain people who've been through difficult experiences, people who maybe are insecure about their sexuality and aren't at that point yet where they're comfortable. So when you have people who maybe say, for example, you were a Chelsea fan and you were in the LGBTQ plus community and you heard your manager saying that, you can imagine that that would upset you, and people had a right to react in the way they did. And it's also the idea of comparing two players being in a relationship with something like an inappropriate power struggle between, coach and player, and comparing it in that sense, it does make it sound wrong, and that's not the kind of opinion that she obviously probably has. I mean, she's had to come out and obviously say, that's not the way she meant it. But especially as well, if you think about the fans and you think about the players who are in a relationship, a serious relationship, in fact, in her club. Can you imagine how they felt as well? So you be really careful about what you say, and things like that can be extremely damaging. And I really think that that was something that she should not have said in the way that she did, and in relation to other appropriate things that had been happening.
Yeah, she obviously was able to resolve it in the end. She did t speak to her players, but yeah, I was watching that press conference live, and I thought that's a little bit of a strange tangent to go down. Obviously, when you've been asked about one relationship or the other, but well, I think as the profile of the women's game has increased, such as these players being role models, and you look at Beth Mead, Viv Miedema, how open they are about their relationship. I think Mead's book, I'm sure everyone watching and listening to this has probably read it by now, and if they haven't, I would certainly recommend it again. But just how important is it for you as a fan to be able to look at players, and it's almost that common ground as well, but to know that if they can do this, if they can, be so open about their sexuality, sit down and talk about it, even just posting on Instagram, look at Manu Zinsberger at the moment with her partner being really open, going through pregnancy and everything, and that'll open a lot of football fans' eyes, because a lot of traditional football fans are not going to be used to seeing this sort of thing, and it's so good to see them be so open on social media. Have you been pleased, to see this and to see the visibility that's offered?
Yeah, definitely. I think like the more that we push towards allowing these players to have that sense of, it's about being personal, it's about sharing what they want to share, but also things like this, sharing, if they're with a woman, if they're engaged to a woman, married, having a baby, all these amazing things. Having seen that, it makes me feel even more comfortable. Luckily, I already do feel quite comfortable, but if I was somebody who was a little bit more unsure, maybe I'd look at that and think, especially if I was somebody who or those who are relatively new to understanding their own sexuality, to see that, to understand that, and for them to be so open, it makes you come into that situation feeling a lot more, comfortable, and that you're able to tell people and speak about it, and you don't feel like you have to hide who you are in any way. And it's about having those different kinds of representation. It would be, it's great that we see now diverse representation even within the LGBTQ plus community. It's not necessarily just one type of person. We need to really keep pushing to get even more different kinds of role models, different sexualities, because it's so important that people, you have to you have to see it to be it kind of thing. It's that mentality really, and we really need to keep going. And obviously, yeah, Manny Zinsberger is another one. Obviously, another women's player, obviously not Arsenal, but Katrina Gorry and her whole story with her wife now having that baby recently. So it's like things like that so important in women's football in general, and especially a club like Arsenal, who is so, forward thinking and always trying to progress. And obviously having that documentary about Beth and Viv, that just shows, doesn't it, the kind of direction that they're trying to go in and what a positive direction it is.
Yeah, no, it certainly opened my eyes up. I think again, I say coming into this, I've started really watching women's football around the sort of 2019 World Cup. Again, a straight male coming into this, it's like I've learned so much, and I can admit that I'd like to think I'm still young enough to be to accept being at that stage where you are learning a lot, and by speaking to people like you say, like yourself, who are really open about their sexuality for certainly the journalism side, you're with such a more diverse range of people, than you are when I go and cover men's games. And, I've covered men's games down the pyramid, and, sometimes you'll be lucky enough you'll meet a few different people, but often it can be sort of the same caliber of maybe older male journalists. But there's something so good. I mean, you've had your one press box experience, haven't you? And it's like there's such a youthful feel about that. And I think obviously when you're stepping into that for the first time, as I have been not too long ago, and as you were on the final day, it's so nice to see people who you feel represent you and your background and your views. I don't know how you feel about that, but on the journalist side of things, you've also got those role models, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, if we take like Girls on the Ball, for example, one of the, top journalists, like they were like the originals really, and they really changed the demographic in terms of women's football and kind of working together and being open about being in a relationship and things like that. So that's so important that we continue to push for that. And I also think, it's really opened my eyes to people who are coming into this as journalists, as fans, who maybe don't identify within that community, like yourself, but have been so supportive and have acted like an ally, and you can sort of change the perspective. And this, I guess, it's like a view of people maybe that we've been like having wrong this whole time. And I don't say you want to group all people together, but obviously like that idea that if you like men's football and you go to men's football games, you're going to be this male hooligan who is homophobic and things like that, and trying to change that and say, actually, there's straight males within the women's football community that have been so supportive, that have always been open to learning and advocated for change, and having allies is just so important. And it's about, feeling like you fit in also with people who are similar to you, but also those who aren't, and that you don't ever feel out of place no matter who you're talking to. And everyone knows, if you're in this community, if you're in the journalism world of women's football, if you're a fan, like most people would say that they have been accepted and felt like they belonged, and they felt like they could talk to anyone and everyone. And that's kind of, yeah, the best part really, isn't it? About having that community and what we're building, and how it's only going to keep progressing in my eyes. And hopefully, yeah, we continue to have any negative stories to share about that, similar to the Emma Hayes situation, and to obviously players outside of this country who have comments that maybe don't need to, or like things that maybe don't need to be liked publicly.
It's what frustrates me when that ex-England player who, well, was washed up midfielder at QPR for a while, whose name we won't mention, when he goes about how women shouldn't be in the men's game. And I always think, well, you never talk about men not being in the women's game, because if you're going to keep going on about keep women out of men's football, there's a lot of men who want to be in women's football at the same time and have opened their eyes to that. And I think we've maybe ignored that demographic of actually maybe men who are in the LGBTQ plus community. You must meet a lot of them in the fan base who probably feel the attractiveness of women's football rather than the men's, who probably go to both, but maybe feel they can be a little bit more open when they go to the women's game.
I think like when we look at it, and unfortunately I've seen so many occasions where, men in general, no matter who they are, how they identify, have gone to women's games. You know, there's been videos of us all singing, and you'll see the comments and you'll see the hate directed towards the men for supporting women's football. That's such a negative thing because if we're going to continue to build a supportive community of all different kinds of people, we need everybody to feel welcome and we need everybody to sort of be able to be a part of that. And the more that the negativity is posted online, just for doing something as simple as going to a women's game and singing, that is just, yeah, it is similar to the comments that were obviously made about women's football in general. But I think that we never see women's football as a place for women only, and that's like it's not something that we've ever tried to claim. So I don't think it's like in any way like that, is it? Like it is in men's football with those men who think that it should just be men. And I think, you know, women's football is for everybody, and that just doesn't mean certain people that we pick and choose. So yeah, we have to we really have to, you know, make everybody feel welcome in that sense.
It is one of those ironic things, isn't it? Where if Arsenal women go and you know a couple of thousand fans turn up at the Emirates and you get all the negative comments saying there's no one there, when they sell it out and they have these you know fan walks down the street, you then get all the abusive comments. It's just going to be, you know, some people's heads seem they'll just never be turned in the right direction. Arsenal have obviously been quite vocal about Pride Month. We'll come on to the Gay Gooners because I'd like to mention their work definitely, but it does still strike me that if you open up social media, you maybe go on Arsenal men when they post about Pride Month, compare that to the post when Arsenal women do it. There's still that negativity online, isn't there? How important, you know, because you'll see stuff, we all see stuff on social media. But how different is it, you know, when you're face to face with people, when you're in that Arsenal community? If you, I don't know your experience of going to men's games at all. I struggle to get to many, but how comfortable would you feel going to the Emirates with your partner for a men's game, you know, compared to a women's game? Because I do feel like the club as a whole, you know, it is one of the more inclusive ones, isn't it? And you go to any game and there's all these messages about stamping out discrimination and exactly how you can go and do that. How would you feel about going to men's games with your partner?
Yeah, for me, it's not really something that I have done often. I don't, you know, I think that's just a case of I spend all my money on the women's football and it's a lot to follow them up and down the country for the entire season. So it's just a case of, you know, what it's like trying to get tickets in these situations. But I can imagine in a hypothetical situation, it would be not the same at all. I don't think I would feel like I could go and join in with anything. I don't feel like I could, you know, go to any pre-match things or anything like that really because I think as soon as I walked in with my partner I would be on edge. It's the kind of the same way that I feel sometimes day to day, you know. I think we have come a long way in society in general, and I know we talk so much about how the Lionesses and everything that they did, and even before that, and everything that's happening right now, is trying to change society's perception, and that is fantastic because we definitely are doing that. And I think we're doing that mainly in the case of women in society, but we've still got a little bit further to go for LGBTQ plus individuals in society, because I would still go in certain situations, maybe out in public, and I would be scared to hold my partner's hand. Like that's just a case of maybe my own just being anxious in general, but if I went to a women's football game, I've never been anxious once to hold her hand, to be affectionate in person, to show any kind of, you know, to show any kind of romantic gestures at all in person, because that's how I've been made to feel. In society, we're not quite there yet. At men's football games, we're not quite there yet. But the more that we push in women's football, the more we're going to change, hopefully, a little bit of, you can't change everybody, can you? We've already clarified that. People will always, you know, stay the same and be stuck in their mindset. But those who are open to be educated, we should really keep pushing for that. And that's why work of like the Gay Gooners in general and other, you know, communities and platforms and sharing news stories and having representation is so important.
It is, you know, it still does show, you know, the fact that you and your girlfriend, you know, if me and my girlfriend were, you know, walking down the street, I feel we'd be quite comfortable to hold hands. But the fact that you're not shows just how much we have to come as a society, just how much work needs to be done, because it's simply not fair that you don't feel, you know, free enough to do that. And then I think maybe you look at the Men's World Cup in Qatar, where you know, you certainly wouldn't be able to if you were able to go over there. If you were there with a player, perhaps in a same-sex relationship, you wouldn't feel comfortable. But we saw the likes of Leah Williamson, Alex Scott, who was over there, speak about it as a pundit as well. And Williamson readdressed that issue in a address to the Oxford Union. You were on top of that story. What did she have to say?
Yeah, I think like when we like we've said before, when you have, big role models within women's football, it's really important the way that they talk about these issues and they bring them up. And yeah, I covered the entire thing and just even watching it, I was just amazed. I think we know what a fantastic person Leah Williamson is. She's always demonstrated that. She's a fantastic leader. She's a great captain for England. Obviously captaincy duties sometimes for Arsenal. And yeah, she touched on the obviously the armband thing at the Men's World Cup, and she effectively said that had she been at the Men's World Cup, there's no way she wouldn't have walked on that pitch wearing the armband, and there's no way that she could have not worn it. And I think that that just really shows the importance of the issue to people like her, and then obviously that reflecting on the fans as well, and the fans hearing that it just solidifies that they feel the same way that we do, that we're all in this together. They're not above us. Because if you were, say, for example, if a men's player who maybe, was captain of the team that you loved, went out and said, or didn't say anything or didn't speak on the matter, it would make you feel a little unsure and a little, disappointed because you're supposed to idolize certain players within the team that you love. And if they're not standing up for these issues, then yeah, it really just says a lot, doesn't it? And it makes you feel a bit hurt. And yeah, we know what there's a lot of other things that Leah Williamson covered in there, but I think talking on diversity, representation, and obviously the LGBTQ plus community is so important, and she did that extremely well.
Looking at the Gay Gooners then, who have been around for quite a while now, and they're quite a force when you go to Arsenal men's and women's games. They're very colourful around the ground. I don't know how involved you are of them at all, how much you see of them, but how important is it for Arsenal to work hand in hand with them, and what do you think the club can continue to do to support? To support LGBTQ plus fans and wider issues in the game going forward.
Yeah, first of all, let me say they are amazing. This is something that I would love to do more next year. Obviously, when you come into a new environment, you come into a new community and you make the effort to start going to more games and meeting new people. Obviously, it's all new, it was all new to me at the time, but as I'm progressing, especially within hopefully, the journalism side and also as a fan, I would love to be more involved because I feel like what they're doing is absolutely incredible. Obviously, if you've been to the Emirates, you'll see the video that comes up um pre-match. Things like that are so important. Obviously nobody bats an eyelid at the women's game, but I think in general it's not just about those people like myself. Like I would say I'm extremely lucky to feel comfortable in my sexuality and who I am, but I think it's more for those who maybe, like I said earlier, are not so sure about that, especially, we're talking just about sexuality, but obviously I want to touch on like transgender people as well, things like that. It's so important that we're talking about everybody here. We're not talking about a specific person or a specific, identity. We're talking about making everybody feel included. And if we can continue to push incredible work that will make everybody feel like they belong within this community and within this environment, that's exactly what the work that they're doing. And I, would love to be more involved and really push as much as I can, to help them in any way because it's so important that you feel like you have a place when you go and watch the team that you love.
Mm. You touched on transgender fans, and believe me, I'm friends with plenty of trans people. One of my flatmates and I often have plenty of conversations, and they've really opened my eyes on sort of the issues that are faced. It's not an easy time at all to be a trans person in the UK. Without getting into any kind of politics, it feels like they're being attacked, from all sides of the country almost daily, through no fault of their own. How have you spoken, to trans fans at all, and how do you feel their experiences in women's football? Because, like you said, that can often be maybe an area that's forgotten about.
Yeah, I haven't, so far. And again, I think that's something that we really could look into more next season as I try and hopefully work with them in the future and sort of build on that because I think you're right. I think the worst thing is it's often people within the community that don't, give them enough support and often, forget about those people because I think we can't just be focusing on one. Like I say, this is about everybody. I would love to speak to people and learn about their experiences and what we can do as fans and as a community to help, especially, people who go to games often and maybe don't feel like they can be as involved. I think it's about making everybody feel included, and it's about knowing how their experience have been and what we can do better. And I think we all need to come together and sort of make that something that we focus on. Let's not just focus on, sexuality in terms of who you're dating. Let's focus on who you are as a person deep down. And it's just so important that, yeah, we make sure everybody feels included.
Yeah, plenty of work to do, but it is so good. And I'm sure you're so proud, to go to Arsenal, to go to Meadow Park, to go to the Emirates and away games as well. I guess, do you feel wherever you go for a women's game, do you feel exactly the same when you're with that overall community?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, home is always home, isn't it? Like there's something different about that. That's never going to change. And I think we can, like we're saying, the work that they're doing in general is fantastic. I mean, the club as a whole, yeah, you will always look at a situation and think there's more that can be done because there always will be. And, maybe we can always say we're never going to be 100% content, but we have to say it wouldn't be good. It would be something that would matter to me if I was, watching a club week in, week out, supporting the team, and I didn't feel like I belonged. That would be such, you know, it would change how often I would go to games, but anyone who's in within the red and white and within the fans in general knows that you never feel out of place. You always feel like one of them, and you can be around 10 different people with 10 different lives, sexualities, identities, anything. And we all come together over a mutual love of Arsenal, and that's what makes it so great, in my opinion.
Yeah, very, very, very good words indeed. Just finally, before we wrap up, big one. What does Pride Month mean to you, overall?
I'm somebody who, has always been very comfortable in my sexuality. I'll be honest about that. I've known since I was 14. I'm now 22. So I'm 8 years into being comfortable. But if you take my partner, for example, she's only been, getting comfortable with it and in the last year or two. And that's it's very different for everybody, isn't it? Everybody has different experiences, everybody has different stories, everybody thinks about it at different points, and that doesn't make anybody, any less deserving of celebrating Pride Month. If you figured it out yesterday, if you're still unsure, everybody needs to feel like they can celebrate. And I've been to Pride events in different places, and I've seen what that means to so many different people, and it makes you feel emotional because it's always that sense of belonging that matters to me, you know, and being who I want to be. And it doesn't mean any certain thing about how you dress, how you act. It's not about that. It's about that sense of community, belonging, and acceptance. And for those who, are not able to be out to their friends and family, for those who struggle with it, who miss out on relationships and friendships with people because they're not supportive. Pride Month is for those too. It's not just for people who are comfortable and happy with who they are. So we have so much work to do to make everybody feel accepted in the community. We can still push for more. Like we said, we won't get into the politics of it all, but yeah, that is the most important thing. It's about just having that time to celebrate how far we've come, but also, how much further we've still got to go.
Daisy, a pleasure. Thank you so much, for being so open about everything, and it's much appreciated. And I hope we've had a good conversation. Do drop a comment below. Do get in touch. I'm sure Daisy, your DMs are always open
Always, yeah.
to come and talk to you because there are plenty of resources out there, and everyone's on their own individual journey. In different ways, and people hopefully, in the Arsenal women community is a safe place and a welcoming place. But like you say, there's always more work that can be done. Thank you again, for being so open.
Yeah, and thank you for obviously letting us talk about this. It's so important that we, make episodes like this. We can't stay quiet in these situations. We have to be open. But, both of us, we're very, like, in general, we're very different people, but we are also quite the same in terms of, the interests that we have. And I think we'd both at any point be open to talking to anybody if we could in any way help. You know me, on any social media, I'm a very quick replier, and I'm I'm always quick to talk to anybody about anything. So please get in touch about anything and we'll try and point you in the right direction if you are struggling, if you just want to talk about your own experiences. I know sometimes that was all I wanted was to be able to tell somebody or relate to somebody or something like that. So if if you don't have that person, then please let me be that person. So yeah.
Yeah, we are different people, but I can't believe you're 3 years older. That reminder that you're three still doesn't make sense. It was well, like when we were out the other night, and I was about a foot taller than everyone, but I was the youngest there. Still takes a bit of getting used to. Daisy, thanks a lot again for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.